Hello, my name is Olga Holownia and I'm the Program and Communications Officer for the International Internet Preservation Consortium, IIPC, based at the British Library.
Hi, my name is Sally Chambers and I'm the Digital Humanities Research Coordinator at the Ghent Centre for Digital Humanities at Ghent University in Belgium. We would like to thank the organisers for transforming this year's conference into an online event.
In this presentation, we will first set the context by talking about web archives and Glam Labs, which we see as three overlapping journeys, also connected to the past three DHN conferences. So we'll focus on that period to firstly give you a brief introduction to web archiving, labs, and communities around them. Secondly, to highlight what has changed in labs and research use of web archives since DHN 2017. And finally, by doing that, we would like to propose how labs can support the use of web archives alongside other resources. Even though web archives are becoming more familiar in the DH community, we would like to go back to basics. As stated on the IIPC website, web archiving is the process of collecting portions of the World Wide Web, preserving the collections in an archival format, and then serving the archives for access and use. Wikipedia lists over 100 web archiving initiatives around the world. Over half of them are web archiving programs within organizations that are members of the IIPC. 5 Nordic national libraries were among the first in the world to launch web archiving programs, and in 2003 joined other 7 institutions to create IIPC. This slide provides a number of examples of web archives, including both the Internet Archive with its famous Wayback Machine and web archives from national libraries around the world. However, the 2 quotes that you see here from Jane Winters and Ian Milligan, both professors of history who make active use of the web archives in their research, web archives are still underused resources for contemporary and digital historical research. One of the core challenges to research use of web archives is the legal frameworks that govern access to this material. In the web archives shown here, access ranges from open to completely closed or half-open special collections. The global pandemic COVID-19 has both inspired extensive web archiving activities throughout the world, with the beneficial side effects of shining a spotlight on the importance of web archives, as well as raising the interest in using archived web datasets for analysis. In this slide, you can see examples of both national COVID-19 collections and the collaboration between web curators and volunteers around the world to create the novel coronavirus COVID-19 collection. In this transnational collection, over 21 million documents from 146 countries have been archived. Whereas national legal framework can inhibit access to web archives, this transnational IIPC collection is working on giving global access to this data. Furthermore, the sheer size and complexity of such datasets need new levels of digital literacy and tools, which brings us to labs.
Library, or GLAM, Galleries, Libraries, Archives and Museums labs, started emerging around the mid-2000s, with the first lab thought to be the Scholars Lab at the University of Virginia Library. Glam Labs can be seen as experimental incubators for digital humanities research and an environment where combining resources can happen. Our goal, as we mentioned earlier, is to see how different libraries use the labs to provide access to both digitized and born digital data, and whether this approach is a way of solving the access problem. A meeting at the British Library Labs event in September 2018 led to the creation of an international Glam Labs community, which continues to grow. In 2019, we held a meeting at the Royal Danish Library in conjunction with DHN 2019, and later that year, a group of labbers worked for a week during a book sprint, the result of which was the Open a Glam Lab publication, which you can download from the Labs website. You can also find out more about this project by following the link to the Labs poster, which is at DH 2020. We strongly believe in the importance of networks and communities and in building bridges between them. DHN being one of the communities we are reaching out to. In addition to labs, a number of initiatives were launched to promote this type of bridging between web archiving and the research communities. 3 examples we can name here are RESOR, the research infrastructure for the study of archived web materials, WARCnet, Web Archive Studies Network, researching web domains and events, and the IIPC Research Working Group. The third journey that we mentioned was ours at DHN. It started with Nordic Web Archiving Panel in 2017. The lesson we learned then was that access was still the biggest barrier. In the 2018 workshop at the National Library of Finland, we tried to address that by working with the library to give access to the web archive data for a hands-on experiment in which we also combined web archives with digitized newspapers. By adding labs to this context in 2019 and combining them with web archives in 2020, we are incorporating our lessons learned over the past 3 years. So, where might we go from here in 2021?
Networks, working groups, and dissemination platforms are one of the key changes of the past 3 years, but equally important are developments in terms of access, better understanding of researchers' requirements and challenges that web archives pose, an increasing number of case studies, and last but not least, developments of tools to work with web archives. This is what we would like to focus on in this section. As identified back in 2017, access to web archives remains a challenge. However, a very promising development in this area comes from Denmark. The Royal Danish Library has developed a business-as-usual service which enables researchers to apply to use the Danish National Web Archive. By completing an application form from the Net Archive website, access can be granted in 2 to 3 working days. Extractions of web archive datasets are also possible on signature of a delivery agreement. These legal documents have recently been translated into English to inspire other web archives to provide a similar service. The Internet Archive's Archivids research services have also been exploring some of the challenges that researchers face in using web archives. For example, technical issues in research use of web archives include the complexity of work format, the size of web archive collections, the infrastructural requirements to process such datasets, and diversity of contained data. Alternatively, conceptual issues for research use of web archives include provenance and acquisition of the data, plus the breadth and abundance of the data available. Despite these challenges, there are an increasing number of case studies demonstrating research use of web archives. The 3 examples shown here from France, the Netherlands, and Portugal represent a variety of case studies of news projects using web archives, ranging from page comparison to large-scale data analysis. Another core challenge for researchers using web archives is extracting and viewing relevant data from web archive or work files using data processing pipelines. However, help is in sight as new tools are being developed to facilitate this process. Firstly, developed over the past 4 years, the Archives Unleashed project is focused on creating a toolkit, a methodological approach to working with web archives, and it had also built a community around researchers who have been experimenting with web archives using the Archives Unleashed tools. There is the user-friendly version of the toolkit, the Archivid service integrated with the Archives Unleashed cloud, a standalone version of the toolkit which requires more advanced programming skills, and recently the Archives Unleashed team has also introduced the Archives Unleashed Notebooks. Secondly, some of you may already be familiar with Tim Sharratt's Glam Workbench, which is a series of Jupyter notebooks for working with cultural heritage collections. This has recently been extended to include 16 notebooks dedicated to web archives and enables researchers to work with smaller scale datasets. The Jupyter Notebooks are among tools offered by the UK Web Archive, which was the lead on the collaboration with the Glam Workbench. The slide also shows different aspects of research engagement in the UK Web Archive, including PhD placements, as an example of how national libraries have encouraged research use of web archives, particularly in recent years. Importantly, the UK Web Archive datasets are available along other datasets offered through the BL Labs digital research space, which takes us back to labs.
In this final section, let's look at some of the examples of how access to archive web resources have been provided alongside other types of resources in labs environments. In library or Glam Labs environments, the focus has primarily been on access to digitized collections. However, we are increasingly seeing access to web archive datasets through labs environments. Examples include KB Labs from the National Library of Netherlands, providing access to the derived datasets from its special web archive collections. ÖMB Labs from the National Library of Austria provides access to the metadata descriptions of its entire web archive. Library of Congress Labs offers access to the web archive datasets, and the Royal Danish Library provides access to link graphs from their national web archive, NetArchive, via their labs environment. The Emerging Innovation Hub at KBR, the Royal Library of Belgium, is an example of an experimental space within the library, which brings together several initiatives, such as the KBR Digital Research Lab, focusing on text and data mining, and the data.kbr.be platform to facilitate data level access to the KBR's digitized and born digital collections. This innovation hub will develop sustainable workflows to facilitate research use of these collections. Increasingly, providing data level access to cultural heritage collections or collections as data are becoming more common to facilitate computationally driven research in libraries. This diagram shows the collections as data methodology created by Gustavo Candela and colleagues from the University of Alicante to identify, extract, clean, enrich, and package cultural heritage data ready for research use. These collections as datasets can be then analysed with Jupyter Notebooks, which are increasingly being introduced in labs environments, as you can see here with a number of examples from cultural heritage institutions around the world. In conclusion, DHN has brought us on a journey over the past few years, where through the introduction of web archives in DHN 2017, to a hands-on workshop combining web archives with other types of digital collections in 2018, to introducing labs in 2019, and finally to web archives in labs in 2020. We see labs as ideal environments to stimulate interdisciplinary collaborations between these strong yet isolated communities of web archiving and Glam Labs, to which the digital humanities community is very closely connected. Labs, especially those physically located in national libraries that are also responsible for archiving the national web, are ideal experimental spaces for encouraging the use of web archives, while providing on-site access to archive web materials within the frameworks of legal deposit legislation. At the same time, our hope is to see further innovation hub-like initiatives combining various different types of digitized and born digital resources within one experimental space. And looking to the future, we fully support the vision of the WARCnet community to provide transnational access to the archived web for research. Let's hope that this DH journey will take us in this direction in the years to come. Thank you.